Hello, team. All right, so we're going to have a few more of you to arrive, but we're going to get going anyway. Okay. Hello, Shanley. How are you?
Hi, and I'm good.
Good. All right. So as everybody arrives, we'll get ourselves underway. But we're going to be reviewing concepts with regards to the market model, specifically thinking about your maximum and your minimum prices and the effects of those. Okay. Why governments put them in place. What are the overall effects of them? Maybe possible solutions to them, and that sort of an idea. So that's the key thing I want to make sure that we're covering today. There is also some work that is due in today. So that's something that I will be noting in the tasks to make sure that everybody's up to speed on all of the activities and that they're getting the things done as need and asking questions if they're not sure. Good to see you all. Great. Fantastic. We've got almost a full house coming in now, which is brilliant. Right now, in the classroom, one of the things I have posted is your Nearpod link. So if I do the presenting screen, jump through the window, and we should end up, is it this one? No, it's this one. Right, and the code you should have, excuse me, JZFYU. JZFYU. Should be in the classroom. I posted it this morning, but if not, it will appear in the top left-hand corner of the Nearpod. There it is, JZFYU. Now, I want to go back through, as said, the systems of intervention that the governments are doing. So the idea of price controls, the idea of a maximum and a minimum price, just to make sure everybody's all okay with that. So if I just check, all right, still waiting on some to join. So if you can jump into the Nearpod, that would be fantastic. All right. Now, as we go through, let's have a look. So we talked about the market as being a free market and how prices are going to be the signal. Prices are going to determine where the resources go. Prices are going to signal the producers about starting and stopping, the revenues that they're able to earn, and they're going to send a signal to consumers as well, right, as to potential deals that they could have. We talked about different types of demand. So we had complement goods, which was joint demand. We had substitute goods, which was competitive demand. We had derived demand, where the demand for one good was found from the demand for another good. We had composite demand, where there was demand for the demand for a product where there was more than one use for that particular product. Then we had what's called joint supply, where there's two or more goods that are produced together. All right. And we had some examples of those. And then we started talking about the maximum price. Now, what we said was it was called a price ceiling. We said it was going to be set because the government was worried that the market price was too high. So because we call it a maximum price or a price ceiling, the implication being that you can't go above that price. So therefore, it is always going to be set underneath the market clearing level. And one of the things I said to you is that 1 year they asked why. They asked why it wasn't set above the equilibrium. Whoa, tricky question. All right. The point being is if it is above the equilibrium, then the market is already lower than that price, lower than that ceiling. So it will just automatically go back to that equilibrium. All right, it's imposed by the government. The reason why they're doing it, the equilibrium price is deemed to be too high. They're wanting to increase availability of the product. They may be wanting what's called equality and equity issues about can people with lower incomes afford this particular product. There are real life examples that we discussed and real side effects because the government's intervening. That we said that the market works all by itself, or the government intervenes and it causes excess demand to happen. It causes shortages to occur. It means that there might be the excuse me, the underground economy working, right? It might be that you end up with a whole lot of black markets going on, right? Particularly this was the case during wartime. And if you've seen some of those sort of war movies and TV shows like, well, when we were younger, MASH, right, which was a TV show about a hospital in the Korean War. And there was quite often discussions about how they were going to get medical supplies because there was just a shortage of them all. And they would have to go to the black market, the underground economy, right, the non-legal market in order to get those medical resources. Right? Now, the government might choose to have rationing systems. They might choose to have queuing systems. Those are possible solutions. They're going to have problems, as we can understand. Visually, diagrammatically, we saw there's the ceiling. We needed to make sure that we had the labeling right. Right? We need to illustrate that there's a much lower price. We need to illustrate that there has been a decrease in quantity supplied, an increase in quantity demanded, creating that shortage. And you had a go at that. Then we discussed the idea of minimum prices, So those are ones which are the reverse. Remember, these are ones where the government says the equilibrium price is too low. So therefore, we need to set a floor by which a legal minimum by which the market price can't go below. Right? And it's more on the side of the producers. It's more to guarantee them a type of income. And we talked about examples. We had agricultural markets, we had the minimum wages, and one of the big problems with them, one of the side effects of the government intervening is this idea of an excess of supply or a surplus that gets created. And sometimes it can be very big. Now, how you solve a surplus can be quite tricky. If you're talking agricultural markets and the government has put this in place, then the government might buy up those resources, those goods, you know? But if you're talking a minimum wage, then you're talking about people. So unless the government provides jobs for those people or the government subsidizes the cost to hire those people, then I don't know that there are that many solutions to that minimum wage idea. No, the problems caused by the minimum wage. All right, now here we go. Here's our minimum price in a diagram form. So we saw that in the market model, the price was set higher than the equilibrium price. It was a solid line representing the fact that it's a legal minimum. The labeling on both sides. We see here there was our decrease in quantity demanded, which we expect because the price has risen, and our increase in quantity supplied. Again, we expect that because the price has risen, giving us that incentive. Now, ladies and gentlemen, quite often we see these occurring in agricultural markets. Quite often it's therefore maybe less developed countries that are more agriculturally based. You wouldn't necessarily see as much of this in countries like the Singapores and the Hong Kongs, the minimum prices, because they may not have the sorts of markets that allow for these to come into place. You could argue about minimum wages potentially. All right, so this is where we talked about the minimum wage. All right. And the surplus that is generated from a minimum wage creates unemployment. Now, what you're going to find a little bit later on, if you go on in the course, as we go on in the course, you're going to find that the government has as one of their goals, one of their aims, objectives for their job is to actually reduce the amount of unemployment. Okay, they get voted in and voted out, right, based on whether they are creating jobs, right? Okay, so that can then be a problem if you've got this idea, you're putting a minimum wage in place, but it might actually cause some unemployment. And the people that it are possibly causing to be unemployed might be those very people that we're actually wanting to put the minimum wage in place to support. Now, I want you to have another go at answering this, please. Why might a government use a minimum price in a labour market? Away you go. All right, so have a go. Why do you think a government might use a minimum price in a labour market? Good idea, huh? Good work, Nishan. Yeah, very good, Hajna. Maybe when you say need to be supported, you might want to just add a bit more. How do they need to be supported? Why do they need to be supported? Yes, well done, Kane. They're wanting to guarantee minimum wages for workers. That's absolutely right. Why do you think they want to do that? What's the point in that? Yeah, but we're talking about the workers now, Yuchun. So talking about the people in the jobs, the labour, us. When we have a job, why might the government want to make sure that there is a minimum wage that we could possibly be paid? Waiting on a couple more. Just waiting on Brandon and Lancelot to have a go. Yes, Emma, well done. So that weaker members of society get supported. So what are we meaning by the weaker members of society? What are we meaning by getting supported? You're absolutely right, but just, a little bit more explain. Oh, they can afford the costly lifestyle. Does it have to be a costly lifestyle or just a lifestyle so that they can afford to live? That's absolutely right, though. Yes, but why, Lancelot? Why do they want to guarantee a minimum wage for workers? The question is why? And Brandon, have a go. I mean, I can't be sure if there are some of you who don't have a part-time job. It might be. You might. I did all the way through school and university, had several part-time jobs. I think my record at university was holding down 5 part-time jobs as well as studying. But I was young, so I could do that sort of thing. But why? Why would you want to have a minimum wage? Let's stop the sharing and go back to the meat. Okay, so what? How about this? Let's say that you don't have a part-time job yourselves, and you might. I don't know. Okay. But what you might do is you might possibly get some form of allowance or pocket money from mum and dad. Maybe. I don't know if I turn the chat function. Where's the chat function gone? Yeah. No problem with that. That's all right. So in the chat function, because you may not want to speak, all right, but in the chat function, if you get an allowance or pocket money from mum or dad, would you, if you're okay with that, if you were able to say, yes, I do, I get pocket money, or yes, I get some form of allowance from mum and dad. I mean, you may not. It may just be a case of things that you need mum and dad just buy for you. Or it might be that they don't. And you have to, earn your credits at home. And then once you've earned a certain number of credits, you get given the thing. I don't know. Yeah. Our son earns some pocket money, but he was also able to earn like bonus points for doing well in the school. And as a result of earning bonus points, which he quite likes, it's very video game-esque, he's able then to save those up and able to buy some things with that. Okay. So anybody in the chat function, let me know, do you get an allowance? Yes or no? Have a go. Just asking in general. Yes. Good. Yeah. Few of you. Because I guess when you get to your age, right, the old people that you now are, right, it may be a case where you actually have to have that conversation with mum and dad about how big your allowance is. And mum and dad have to say to you, well, that's your allowance. You can't have more than that. Yeah. And then your answer to them possibly is, but there are things that I need. Yeah. There are things that I need. There are things that I need that cost me money. So, yeah, in order to maintain my standard of living, I might need you to up my allowance. Yeah. Has anybody ever had a conversation with mum or dad, those of you who've got the allowance or the pocket money, where you've actually had to have a conversation asking them to increase your allowance, or had a conversation about how much the allowance is. All right, because it might be different. You might have siblings and they might get paid a different amount to you. Yeah? No, haven't had that? Okay. Maybe mum and dad just gives you everything. Here you go. Yeah. They wanted me to give 50 every week or something for pocket money. Okay. All right. Fair enough. That's good. That sounds a good thing to do. But what if you want something really expensive? Yeah. And looking at that iPhone 12. Yes, I'm looking. All right. iPhone 12 is close to 7,000 ringgit. 7,000 if you get that top end with all the extra bells and whistles. Right, that's quite a bit of money. But maybe you have to have it because you're the upcoming, I don't know, TikTok star or whatever. Yeah? What then? Anybody had those conversations? Have a think about it. We'll jump back into the meet, to the window, and into the Nearpod. Okay, so when we're talking about why, remember it's the reasoning for it. Okay, and so like Brandon says, we're wanting to help the worker, but what we're wanting to do to help the worker is to provide them with an income where they're going to be able to afford the things that they want and they need. Yeah. And yes, we might disagree. We might think, well, you know, maybe they don't need the phone. Yeah. Or maybe they only need this version, and maybe, yeah. But you yourself, I mean, your conversations with mum and dad, when we went all the way back and you were talking about wants and needs. Yeah. Well, what you wanted, what you needed. Yeah, how did you get those? Well, if the government said this is the minimum price for your labour, how much would that be? It's always an interesting argument, right? When I was working in the supermarket, and this is going back, yes, I know, a wee while, okay? I was in the supermarket for about 8 to 9 years, something like that. And before I got into the management there, just in the normal everyday sphere of you know, stacking the shelves and putting the groceries in the bags, yeah, good solid work. All of that, before I did that, well, when I was doing that, I was earning $3.50 per hour, because that was the minimum wage in New Zealand. So $3.50 New Zealand, if you multiply that by 4, you're not going to end up with many ringgits from that. Yeah, but that's what I was earning. Okay, it did take me an awful long time to save up money for my first pair of basketball boots. All right. All right. So as Lancelot will probably attest, some of the basketball shoes, right, they're shoes these days more than boots, but in any case, some of the basketball sneakers can be quite expensive. I can remember the ones I had, my very first pair of proper ones. They were called Reebok pumps, and they had a little inflatable device at the front, and you push the little button, and they swelled up to support your feet and your ankle so that you didn't roll your ankle. I don't know that it especially worked, to be perfectly honest, having rolled both my ankles, but still. Right, so the minimum wage is to allow you to have a standard of living so you can afford bread and milk. And maybe mum and dad have talked to you about how expensive food prices are getting at the moment, because they're actually increased. We worked it out that our food bill has gone up by nearly 20% since the COVID situation has occurred. Now, if that's the case, and that's not because we're eating more because we're at home more, that's just because the cost of it has actually gone up. And if that's the case for us, you know, other people who are on minimum wage, how are they, getting by with it? And if there are stores that are shut, maybe they can't open to provide the food. All right, minimum wages. We use it to help support people with their standard of living. And if you have been watching the American election, which is obviously quite scary at times, right, then you have probably seen a gentleman wandering around from time to time called Bernie Sanders, and he is a big fan of minimum wages, and he will very, very much likely call for a nationally mandated minimum wage in the United States, which would be quite interesting if they did. Now, if we want to support the producers of a product, in particular agricultural products, we might need to put that minimum price in place. We might need to buy up the surplus. Right? But we also worry about keeping the price stable over time. So, because agricultural products in particular, sometimes they're really expensive, right? The other year it was coffee, was hugely expensive. Right? Other times it's really cheap. Okay? And it depends on the season. It depends on, how wet the season has been. It depends on whether there's been cyclones and hurricanes and, all of those sorts of environmental issues, right, that can have an effect on agricultural industries. So if there hasn't been, there's a bumper crop, which means there's a very big crop, right? They've managed to grow a lot of tomatoes, for example, right? And they grow in a hothouse, but still, right? They've managed to grow an awful lot of their product, right? In America, soybeans, Thailand, rice, yeah? They're able to grow a lot of it. Then it's a bumper crop, but then the price is going to fall. And remember, the government's trying to keep the price at a good level, but they may not want it to get too high because if it's too high up, then the consumers aren't going to be able to afford it. So it is possible, excuse me, for the government to put little buffers, right, little boundaries in place, which prevent it from going too high, but also prevent it from going too low, to kind of support it all the way through, keep it within that boundary. That's called a buffer stock scheme, right? The government manages it. They have to sort it out with the producers. It can end up with the government buying up a whole lot of stock and trying to warehouse it, but that's what they can do. In order for that to work, in order for the government to actually buy that stock, right, the good has to be storable. So we talked about wool in New Zealand, okay, where the government bought all of the wool and stored it in the high schools. Right? If you look at America, if you look at Japan, I think China as well, they have stored a whole lot of oil because they were worried about the price of oil and whether they'd be able to afford it in the future and what if it ran out and all of those sorts of things. So they actually have a whole lot of oil stored. Yeah, they have to be able to store that in order for them to be able to support the price. Right? Otherwise, it might run out. Otherwise, they might not have it. Okay. The good is often commodities, so primary-based goods, agricultural-based goods, rubber, sugar, coffee, grains, right? So your soybeans, your rices, all of those sorts of products. Oil would fit in there as well. And there are going to be considerable price fluctuations or variations, changes in the market. Right? Those are the three reasons why the government would be quite keen to support the price. All right. So should the government actually do this? Right? This is the argument that you then need to think about. What happens if the government intervenes? Well, you could end up with shortages and surpluses. So therefore, should they intervene? If the market eliminates the shortage and surplus, surely we need to let the market work. But if the market works, there are going to be people who can't afford the product or people who aren't earning a good enough income to be able to support themselves. Right? So whether they should or not, yeah, it's difficult. Right? Then the next one was about real-life examples of minimum wages. Okay. So thinking then about different countries like America, where there are different states that have minimum wages, like Malaysia, where there is minimum wages. Yeah. What countries have them? What is the minimum wage in those countries? Always good to have real life examples. And then this idea here, rent control, the idea that what you're doing in that case is you're saying the rental cost of a house is not affordable for people. So therefore, we're going to control that price. We're going to make it so that it's a maximum price in that case, right, for rent. All right. Now, here's a little bit of a, not a trick question, a little bit of a case study based question here. What happened when the New York government, so NY, New York, the New York government in the States put rent control on properties in New York, because the price of properties in New York for rental accommodation at any rate was really expensive. If you've been to New York, you'll be very familiar with this idea. But what happened when they put rent control on it? What happened when they tried to put a maximum price on rent? Have a couple of seconds, have a think. What do you think happened based on the theory we've thus far discussed? If you're entirely unsure, you can ask Dr. Google. Sometimes he knows. There you go. Oh, good. We've got an answer already. More vacancies in the apartments. Okay, it's an idea. Goodness, we've looked this one up. Increased in buildings of 35 units or more for individual apartment improvements to 1/60th instead of 1/40th of the cost. Increase the minimum rent for deregulation of an apartment to, yeah, I don't even understand that one, Eugen. Maybe we can be a bit simpler with our explanation. Maybe we can find something a bit simpler, a bit more straightforward. Yes, that's good, Lancelot. But again, maybe we can be a bit simpler with our answers. Look back at the theory and see if you can figure it out. It's a maximum price on rent. Yes. Okay. All right, we're thinking. Ooh, good work, Lishan. You're thinking. That's very good. Wait on a couple of others. Yes, that's absolutely right, Iman. But what ended up happening as a result of that? A couple more to put an idea in. All right, Emma got an answer. Jane, Brandon. Hopefully it should be reasonably straightforward. Have a look back to the model and see what the model told us. All right. Okay. Right. So what ended up happening was exactly what the model told us. So if we go back to the model, maximum price. Apologies for zipping through your screens like that. All right, so in your notes, you've got a picture of this, I'm hoping. All right, so what happened was they put a maximum price on rent. So instead of the market rent being this equilibrium price, the market rent was this one. Now, they put it on place because, as we know, with maximum prices, this was too expensive. People couldn't afford to rent in New York City, and particularly in the center, the CBD. So they put this maximum rent on, maximum price for rent. Now, that did mean that there was an increase in the quantity of people who wanted to rent, because the price was lower. Rental price was lower. But people who were owning the properties and wishing to let them out actually decreased because they were not receiving the return on their investment that they were previously thinking. So there was actually a decrease in supply or quantity supplied of rental accommodation. So just as we had with any other market, you have the same thing occurring. You end up with an excess of quantity demanded over quantity supplied, an excess of demand. So you end up with a shortage of rental accommodation. So again, the same problem occurs. You end up with more people wanting this particular product than there is possibly available for them to buy it. And the big problem with this is that you're talking now about housing. You're talking about accommodation, people living there. All right, so they don't have a place to live. So what do? Well, they don't live in a house. They live on the street somewhere. Maybe they illegally live somewhere. Yeah. And because this was quite controlled, that's what ended up happening. This was a law. Now, if I stop sharing and jump back to the mute, there we are. Now, what ended up happening was there was a whole lot more homelessness occurring in New York City, okay, which then became a problem later on. A whole lot of people all trying to live together, right, which caused more problems later on. But that idea of people all trying to live together, that became the setting, if you will, for one of the top sitcoms that's ever occurred in the world, comedy sitcoms, comedy TV shows, and it was called it was a TV show. It doesn't, it's still playing around the world, right? But they're out making new episodes, and it was called Friends. So if you've seen the TV show Friends, right, that was set during this time. And there are at least 2 plot lines, if not more, where the plot revolved around the rental cost of the different apartments that they were living in, because some of them were rent controlled. Right? And in order for them to be rent controlled, there were specific rules and all of those sorts of things. And they were actually breaking the rules with regards to how many people were actually living in those apartments. Well, that sort of an idea. Okay. So a popular culture reference there, just to throw that at you. But it did lead to, as I said, some serious social problems. Homelessness, right? There was some crime issues, people all jammed and living in together, more congestion issues, and it just built from that. And there's also what we call in economics an equity issue. Because again, just like with the minimum wage, the group of people that this is hurting the most, affecting the most, are going to be the people with the lower incomes. So not only do they have a lower income, therefore they can't get to buy their own house, they can't afford the apartment costs that are quite expensive, they also can't then afford even the lower apartments because of the rental cap and because there's a shortage of them, right? And more people wanting them. So it meant that tenants were struggling, that's the people who wanted to live, to find a place to live. And the people who owned the buildings then had a whole queue of people wanting to live in their apartment. And they could go, I want this person and not that person. Well, again, this is America and this is New York, so you can guess what happened. Again, people who are disadvantaged, back of the queue potentially, and not able to get it, increase in homelessness, increase in living together in other sorts of situations that aren't as good, and the associated problems that went on from there. So these government policies, they might be aimed at trying to help people, but sometimes they actually make the situation even worse. All right, we look through here. All right, okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have some work that you need that is actually due today. Please have a go through that. So the tasks are going to be to review the content that we've covered, to finish up the work that's due today, and obviously any other work. We're going to be starting a new topic very soon. Now, if we were in class, I'd be able to, sort of see you all and do all of that, but obviously I can't. Now, I've got this. I'll just take that sticker off. Now, I got this here. This is an Amazon purchase. Now, it's not a textbook. You'll notice it's called a study guide. All right. Now, if you may have a textbook. That's fantastic. You've got the digital, right, access as well through eLearn Economics, etc. You will have. Now, the reason why this is quite good, other than the fact that it's quite good, is that it's all summaries and key learning objectives and mind maps and little practice questions. So it's not the theory. It doesn't have all the theory in it. It just has key summary points. So if you are thinking what books would be helpful, this to give you that additional support, right? Particularly as it doesn't have all the theory in it, but it does have summaries, and that can help, particularly if English is, a second language, and you're, trying to work through all of the language within unpacking all of the terminology, etc., that there is in economics. Now, we've done some big model work, so please do review those, because the very next thing that we're going to do is we're going to smash the market model. We're going to have a look at how the market model actually fails. All right, and then we're going to start thinking about government policies that might try and fix those failures. Yeah? And we're going to start saying, well, this is their policy, but does it really work? Like these ones that we've discussed. The government's trying to fix what is, in a sense, what they see as a market failure. But what we are seeing is maybe it doesn't actually work the way they think it will. All right, so we'll finish up there for the day. I will do that one. Okay.